June 15, 1985. In a tiny Tokyo office, three men quietly started what would become the most magical animation studio on Earth. With no name recognition, barely any funding, and only one hit movie between them, they bore Studio Ghibli. Hayao Miyazaki had just stunned Japan with Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, a sci-fi epic filled with flying machines and giant bugs. It wasn't even made by a real studio, but it was a hit, big enough to catch the eye of one man, Toshio Suzuki. Suzuki was a magazine editor, but more importantly, he believed animation could be more than robots and monsters. He believed in Miyazaki and in Isao Takahata, a brilliant director who couldn't draw, but could break your heart with a single scene. Together, they convinced Tokuma Shoten, a Japanese publisher, to fund a studio. They called it Ghibli, like the desert wind, something new, something bold. At the time, they had no idea what they'd started. No Totoro, no Spirited Away, no Oscar. Just a war film, a wind princess, and the stubborn idea that animation could be art. But to understand how Studio Ghibli became a global icon, we need to go back to where the wind first began to blow.
Before there was Totoro, before there was Spirited Away, there were two very different men with one very big dream. Hayao Miyazaki grew up sketching planes. He didn't just like them, he loved them. His father ran a factory that made aircraft parts during World War II, so young Miyazaki spent hours watching machines soar through the sky. To him, flight wasn't about war, it was about freedom. Isao Takahata was different. He didn't draw, he read, and he remembered. As a boy, Takahata survived an American air raid. He never forgot the screams, the smoke, the silence after. He grew up wondering, why do we fight? Why do we suffer? He didn't want to escape the world, he wanted to understand it. They met in the 1960s at Toei Animation. It was Japan's version of Disney, full of color, singing animals, and tight deadlines. Takahata was a young director. Miyazaki was an ambitious in-betweener, basically the guy who draws the parts between the important frames. But Miyazaki wasn't satisfied staying in between. They clicked while working on Horus, Prince of the Sun. It flopped, but it changed both of them. Takahata challenged Miyazaki to think deeper. Miyazaki inspired Takahata to dream bigger. They were total opposites. Miyazaki, the idealist, full of imagination. Takahata, the realist, grounded in truth. But they shared one thing: frustration. Both men were tired of working on stuff they didn't believe in. They didn't want to sell toys, they wanted to tell stories. And in 1984, one story would finally give them the chance. The year is 1984. Japan is still recovering from a rough decade. Anime is mostly robots, space battles, and cute girls. And then, a flying girl on a glider changes everything. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind hits theaters. Audiences are stunned. This isn't just a cartoon. It's a sweeping, hand-drawn epic. Environmental themes, strong female lead, a massive ancient insect army, and it's beautiful. It was made under a studio called Topcraft, not Studio Ghibli, not yet. The film is a surprise hit, so successful it basically forces a studio to be born. In 1985, Miyazaki and Takahata, along with their loyal producer Toshio Suzuki, go independent. They found Studio Ghibli. But why the name Ghibli? Well, Ghibli was an Italian plane used in World War II. Miyazaki, a huge aviation nerd, picked the name because he wanted the studio to blow a new wind through the anime industry. Mission accomplished. And just like that, the Holy Trinity is formed. Miyazaki, the dreamer. Takahata, the philosopher. Suzuki, the glue holding it all together. They have no idea if this will work, but they don't care. They're finally free. And with that freedom comes some of the boldest risks in anime history. And that brings us to Ghibli's early days. Wild ideas, box office bets, and pure hand-drawn magic. The first real Studio Ghibli film wasn't Totoro or Spirited Away. It was Laputa, Castle in the Sky, released in 1986. Beautiful animation, airships, robot guardians, a floating city in the sky, and almost nobody saw it. Laputa flopped, not because it was bad, but because nobody knew what Ghibli even was yet. 2 years later, Totoro, a simple story. 2 kids, 1 giant forest spirit. Audiences were confused. No plot, no villain, no climax. Box office? Meh. But slowly, kids started buying Totoro plushies, and then more and more and more. The merch saved the studio.
Ghibli's finances turned around because of a fat cat bunny with a leaf on his head. And then came a curveball. The same day Totoro released, Ghibli dropped Grave of the Fireflies, a film about war, hunger, and the death of innocence. 2 films, one cheerful, one soul-crushing, released as a double feature. People left the theater not knowing whether to cry or buy a plush toy. But something strange was happening. Even if the films didn't make a ton of money, people remembered them. They stuck. They mattered. And finally, Kiki's Delivery Service. A young witch, a flying broom, and her own small business. Kiki was a hit, Ghibli's first real box office success. It boosted the studio's confidence and gave them space to breathe behind the scenes. The staff was burning out, but they didn't cut corners. Ghibli protected its artists, paid them salaries, emphasized story over speed. This was a studio run by creators, not businessmen. But outside Japan, no one had heard of them. That was about to change. The deal that made Ghibli global. Studio Ghibli had conquered Japan, but the rest of the world, still a mystery. That all changed with a single deal. Tokuma Shoten, Ghibli's parent company, signed a massive international distribution agreement with Disney. Yes, that Disney. The mouse now had the keys to Ghibli's kingdom. But this wasn't a simple happily ever after. On Disney's side was John Lasseter, the creative head of Pixar and a lifelong Ghibli fanboy. He didn't just like Ghibli, he worshipped it. Totoro posters in his office, Spirited Away screenings on company time. Lasseter made it his mission to introduce Ghibli to the West. But things got messy. Dubbing was a war zone. Studio Ghibli wanted their scripts translated faithfully. Disney wanted to make the stories more relatable for Western audiences. That meant cutting jokes, changing lines, and sometimes just flat out making stuff up. Then came Princess Mononoke, Ghibli's most expensive film. Their first across 20 billion yen at the Japanese box office. A stunning, violent, mystical epic. And then Harvey Weinstein. He wanted to cut it, shorten it, make it snappier for American theaters. Miyazaki refused. So producer Toshio Suzuki mailed Weinstein a sword, a real katana. On it was a simple message: no cuts. The film was released uncut. Critics in the US loved it. Audiences kind of shrugged. But something had shifted. The Ghibli name was finally on the map. And all of that, it was just the setup. Because what happened next would change everything. Spirited Away, the film that made Ghibli immortal. Hayao Miyazaki was done, retired, again. He'd said it before, but this time he meant it. Until one summer, he took a trip with some friends and their 10-year-old daughters. The girls were bored. No TV, no cell phones. So Miyazaki made something for them. A story about a girl stuck in a strange world. At first, it was just notes and doodles, but those sketches became Spirited Away. The film almost didn't happen. Miyazaki had no script, no ending, not even a title. The story came together as he drew it, scene by scene. What came out was magic. A bathhouse for spirits, a train running across the sea, a boy who turns into a dragon. But behind the fantasy was something darker. The film was a quiet scream about consumerism, environmental decay, lost identity. Chihiro's journey wasn't just about escaping the spirit world, it was about remembering who she was. Japan loved it. Spirited Away shattered every box office record, bigger than Titanic, bigger than any anime ever. It became the highest-grossing film in Japanese history. And then, it won the Oscar. Best Animated Feature, 2003, the only hand-drawn, non-English film to ever win. Suddenly, the whole world was watching. The quiet little studio in Koganai had gone global. People started comparing Ghibli to Disney, to Pixar, but Ghibli wasn't trying to compete. They were just doing their thing, telling weird, beautiful stories with heart. Spirited Away wasn't just a movie, it was a statement. Ghibli wasn't becoming a giant, they already were. And now, everyone knew it. Next up, Ghibli at its absolute peak. Studio Ghibli becomes a cultural institution. The same year Spirited Away took over Japan, something magical opened its doors in Mitaka, Tokyo, the Ghibli Museum. It wasn't a theme park, no roller coasters, no flashy mascots, just quiet wonder. A maze of staircases, stained glass, and cat buses. Designed by Miyazaki himself. You couldn't even buy tickets at the door. You had to plan to get there, like a pilgrimage. Around this time, something else happened. Totoro became Japan's unofficial mascot, not just for kids, for everyone. People weren't just watching Ghibli movies anymore, they were living with them. Posters in classrooms, stuffed animals on train seats. Miyazaki had become something rarer than a director. He was a national treasure, and yet he kept trying to retire. Then came Howl's Moving Castle, 2004. Then Ponyo, 2008. Then The Wind Rises, 2013. Each time, Miyazaki said, "This is the last one." Spoiler, it wasn't. But something stayed the same, Ghibli's pace. Still slow, still hand-drawn, still no sequels, no spin-offs, no toys flooding shelves. They weren't trying to dominate the market, they were just trying to make art. But what happens when the artist actually walks away? Next, Ghibli's darkest hour. Studio Ghibli nearly disappears. Miyazaki retires. Again, but this time, it feels final. His last film, The Wind Rises, is a quiet goodbye. No flying castles, no forest spirits, just a man, his dreams, and the cost of chasing them. Then, Ghibli halts production, not just slowing down, stopping. Animators laid off, projects canceled, the lights dim. No one knows if it's temporary or the end. Fans panic, news outlets scramble, animators cry on live TV. Takahata releases The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, a final masterpiece. And then, in 2018, he passes away. It's the darkest time in Ghibli's history. 2 founders gone, no plan forward. For the first time in decades, Studio Ghibli doesn't exist. But sometimes, even after the credits roll, there's still one more scene. Coming up, a surprise comeback, led by someone very familiar. The Ghibli spirit endures. Ghibli didn't disappear, it evolved. Goro Miyazaki, Hayao's son, releases Earwig and the Witch. It's Ghibli's first fully 3D CG film, and fans weren't exactly thrilled. Some called it strange, others unfinished. But it meant something bigger. Ghibli was trying to grow. Then, silence. No marketing, no trailers, no hype. Just a sudden announcement in 2023. Hayao Miyazaki is back. The Boy and the Heron releases with no explanation. And yet, audiences showed up. The film becomes a quiet hit, slow, strange, breathtaking. It wins the 2024 Oscar for Best Animated Feature. Miyazaki, age 83, is still storyboarding, still drawing by hand, still dreaming. Meanwhile, Studio Ghibli is changing behind the scenes. In 2023, they're acquired by Nippon TV. Not a sellout, a lifeline. It helps keep the studio stable for the future. And in Aichi Prefecture, a dream becomes real. Ghibli Park opens. No roller coasters, no flashing lights, just quiet forests, hidden tunnels, and life-size worlds from Totoro, Mononoke, Spirited Away. It's not a theme park, it's a place to breathe. Around the world, Ghibli's spirit lives on. You can see it in Pixar, Laika, Cartoon Saloon, even indie games and AI animations on YouTube. They all carry a little of that magic. Studio Ghibli didn't just make animated films, they built entire worlds and invited us to believe in them.